Hey, it's your boy, Sir Tom Hackray, here for a rant about Dreamcast racing games. What the fuck? So here is an interesting game. It's Looney Tunes Space Race. And somehow, it is the best fucking racing game I have played on the Dreamcast. So, here's a little thing about the Dreamcast. All the racing games friggin' suck on it, okay? All of them. Like, albeit there's some, like, good ones, but, like, you have Sega Flag to Flag being kinda mid at best. Sega Rally 2 with its incredible difficulty curve, or rather, it's less a spike and more a plateau. It also has that characteristic loose handling that all first-party racing games have on the Dreamcast, but for whatever reason, it actually works decently well in Sega Rally 2, mostly because it's a rally game. Cars are supposed to control like that because they're on, like, gravel and shit. And then we have F355 Challenge, which is kind of forgettable in my opinion. I keep forgetting I have that game in my collection for whatever reason. And then we have Sega GT, which is just as awful. It has terrible handling, the controls fucking suck, and anytime you tune your car, anything above the standard spec it has when you first buy a car, it becomes uncontrollable. Like you end up having to do that thing on the analog stick, where if your car starts to, like, go out of control, you have to do, like, this back and forth thing, so that way the car can actually, like, you know, straighten itself back out. But for whatever reason, your car is always out of control for whatever reason in Sega GT, and it's just fucking awful. And then you might be thinking, oh, what about, you know, Tokyo Extreme Racer? Tokyo Extreme Racer is actually really good, but it's very stressful, especially since you have to weave through traffic and the handling kind of sucks. So you kind of have to, like, bob and weave through traffic. But because of how it's set up as a game, in which it's more like a racing game with fighting game characteristics, you end up losing your races because your little health bar goes down because the other car pulls ahead because somehow the AI is really good at dodging traffic and somehow you aren't. And even if you could dodge traffic, there's a lot of weird corners that are kind of hard to negotiate because of the controls. And there's even that one part where the highway narrows, and I always keep hitting the wall when it narrows. So there's that to consider. The less said about Test Drive 6, the better. And that brings us to the two really good ones. You know, Metropolis Street Racer in Daytona, USA. But even then, both of those games have their problems. Metropolis Street Racer, it looks good, it sounds good, it controls like a dream, but it's difficult as sin. Mostly because the game gives you some really awful cars early on, and even if you do manage to do that exploit where you farm kudos off of certain hot lap events, the best car you can get is the Toyota MRS, and that thing has a tendency to oversteer to the point where it's impossible to generate kudos and maintain good positioning in a race. So there's that. And then Daytona USA actually controls somewhat decently, albeit you have to turn down the analog stick sensitivity in the options menu. But the fact that Sega at all gave you an option to turn down the crappiness of the controls somewhat is just amazing. Too bad they did it on a game that came out after the Dreamcast died. So, getting back to the topic at hand, Looney Tunes Space Race. What the fuck? So, here's the thing about Looney Tunes Space Race. It's a game by all measures should suck. It's a licensed kids game on a console that allegedly failed. And I say allegedly because a lot of people say the Dreamcast failed, when in actuality the Dreamcast was actually doing very well for itself. It's just that Sega failed before the Dreamcast could fail. Or rather, Sega failed before the Dreamcast could succeed. So, there's that. So, in all fairness, Looney Tunes Space Race ought to be a steaming pile of shit. But for whatever reason, it isn't. It controls really well. The difficulty, I did literally only one race to test to see how the game's controls are. And it controls well, the physics are good. Like, sure, most of the game's difficulty comes from the bullshit item balancing, but it's a kart racer. The item balancing is supposed to be bullshit because that's where most of the fun comes from, especially in multiplayer. Just not in single player, but that's a whole nother can of worms. Should I ever decide to rant about Mario Kart Wii, but but that's why we have Scott the Woz. So anyway, Looney Tunes Space Race. Why? Like, at first glance, the game doesn't even look all that too great, right? The graphics look like a poor man's cell shading. The UI reeks of graphic design is my passion. And overall, the game looks and sounds kind of like crap. But you play it, and somehow the controls aren't like weird and loose and floaty. The characters don't feel all weirdly heavy for whatever reason. It all just feels good. And I can't understand why on God's green earth, why a licensed kids game is better than all of the first-party racing games on the Sega Dreamcast. Like, of course, we have some third-party, examples, Test Drive 6, Tokyo Extreme Racer. But that hardly matters. What matters is I have 6 Dreamcast games. All of them racing games. All of them first-party racing games. Well, of course, I have more Dreamcast games in the corner, but these are 6 of the first-party racing games that I own. And for whatever reason, they all fuck up in one major regard or another. Sometimes they're either brutally difficult. Sometimes they don't control very well because Sega tried to do this weird arcade simulation hybrid modeling on the handling systems of all their games for some stupid reason. It's the point where if you want good racing games, buy a Saturn. Like, all the racing games on the Saturn are actually really great, But here, for whatever reason, Sega couldn't make one good game in this genre, and instead, fucking Looney Tunes, man. Like, that game is, stupidly good for whatever reason, and I can't explain it other than it just controls decently. It controls well. But, good freaking God, man. Why? And it's not to say that all the first-party games are bad. Off the top of my mind, I can think of both Sonic Adventures. I can think of Phantasy Star Online. Skies of Arcadia is really cool, allegedly, because I currently don't have the money to buy a copy, even though I own the GameCube copy, the GameCube version, which is on the backlog for the future, but I am still holding out for a Dreamcast copy because that's allegedly the definitive one because of the VMU minigames or whatever. So there's that to consider, and there's also one other racing game, by the way, that Sega made that somehow isn't as bad as the others, but I kind of have to shoehorn it into this rant because Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure has both a multiplayer foot race thing and a kart racing minigame. And the kart racing minigame actually controls really well for a first-party Sega game. Okay? For a first-party Dreamcast game, the kart racing is, decent. It's not great, it's not fantastic, but it's serviceable. The same way the Brighton E2s were serviceable engines. The E2s, yeah, they were fucking shit, but they lasted until the 1960s and were constantly in use on the London, Brighton, South Coast Railway, and later the Southern Railway, and then later still British Railways. So, yeah. Of course, the foot racing part in the Sonic Adventure 2 multiplayer, that's just normal Sonic and Shadow stages. Those control decently, but, you know, it's a platformer, so technically it doesn't even count. Yoink. So, what do we learn today? That sometimes surprises come in all kinds of different packages, right? Sometimes they come in big packages, sometimes they come in little ones, sometimes they come with really bad cell shading, and other times it is just a box of disappointment. And for whatever reason, Infogrames somehow made one of the best racing games on the Dreamcast. And I don't fully understand why that is the case. Because again, it's a licensed kids game. It's supposed to be bad. And if it was bad, I don't think anyone would really bat an eye at it. But for whatever reason, it's somewhat decent. And I want to love it for it. But all it does is make me highlight the issues that the Dreamcast doesn't have any good racing games on it. And the ones that do are either Looney Tunes Space Race, or they're just games that I haven't owned yet or haven't played yet. Because for whatever reason I refuse to deal with emulation, which is a personal choice. It's a bad personal choice, but it's a personal choice that I'm sticking with. And yeah, it's really cool for whatever reason. That and somehow that game's more tolerable than fucking Daytona USA. So